I got a tip for you right here. Hey guys, welcome back to 5 nothing 100 nothing.com. I am Fuck It. It stands for the fittest underdog guru using intelligent tactics. And today, guys, I got a tip for you right here. Check it out. Okay, talking about general basics of fitness. Okay, and we're going to categorize it in three ways. Okay, you got your mobility and flexibility, you have your strength training, and you have cardio. Okay, something that's raising your heart rate up for a given period of time to work on your aerobic conditioning. Okay, now there's a lot of subcategories, and some of the movements from each of those three categories can definitely be fulfilled. Like some of the benefits cross over. Like for instance, you can make strength training a cardio response by reducing your rest between sets, more time under tension, etc. But let's just keep it real basic, all right? So it's a tip. It's not, a book, so to speak. So I looked at those three, and the categories have to do with age. So the first category being in your teens and through your 20s. This could be late 20s, okay? But just generally that category. You have a lot of testosterone, you're young, you're still filling out, growing, and you're a little more resilient generally, okay? Second category being in your 30s, up through mid 40s, and then depending on how you age and your exercise background, injuries, etc., might be 45 to 50, okay? And that third category being 50 plus till whenever, okay? And obviously there's some probably subcategories where the body changes. For instance, you might have been a youngish 50 that's still able to do a lot that you did in your 30s, but there's going to be a big difference between 50-ish and 80, but just to keep it simple and a tip, right? So when you're in those teens and 20s, and you're being introduced to resistance training, you're trying a lot of different things, right? You might be experimenting with kettlebells, dumbbells, barbell type movements, powerlifting type movements, maybe CrossFit, or things that are a little bit more dangerous. And you have a lot of testosterone, a lot of energy, and it's typically a very good outlet to experience some very intense exercise. For the most part, your connective tissue, tendons, everything can handle. They're a little more durable. Unless, of course, you've got genetics not on your side and you're injury prone, then, of course, the rules may not apply to you. But just generally speaking, right? So mobility and flexibility tend to take a back seat because, that's not your focus at the time. You haven't lived enough life to experience a lot of pain and a lot of injuries yet. And the thing is that most young people, unless they're in a highly trained environment for sports, aren't necessarily going to take that advice. I will say, though, that I have noticed a trend the last few years in the gym where you see younger people taking more time on foam rollers and stretching and doing things like that. They're a little more aware, and maybe they've seen the generation before them be so reckless in the gym that they now are paying a lot more attention to those things. So that's encouraging. Strength training, like I said, that's the time when you're playing with all types of different training volumes. And I'll see young people really push themselves, and the older generation's like, oh, back off, you're gonna hurt yourself, this and that. And a lot of times, think about when you're young, if you're older and watching this, who did you listen to anybody? It's like, shut up, old man, I know what I'm doing. Your day is past. And so that's what happens is, youth is wasted on the young, they say. So that's the time where, and I tell people, just back off, leave them alone, let them go to the edge or past the edge, and they'll come back to the middle once they start experiencing some aches and pains and maybe a few injuries. Then they'll land somewhere in the middle. And then cardio, of course, is going to be based on, your personal preferences, but I think that young people could really benefit in a healthy state with more intense intervals assuming that body composition and physique, aesthetics is really the goal and it's not for a specific sport. And if they're into endurance exercise and whatnot, then again, just like with the weights, that's the time when you do the crazy stuff and you don't have necessarily as much risk for injury. Then getting into like the 30 somethings up to 45, 50, again, depending on your DNA, how you age, what kind of injuries. If you were an athlete when you were younger, you might notice that your body is breaking down a little faster, which is my case, and a lot of people, is that if you were more of an extreme athlete in your youth, as you get a little older, you start to feel those aches and pains settling in, and perhaps your program matures and gets a little smarter, so to speak, or I'd like to say age appropriate, because smart is really one of those things where it's just really depending on what your goals are. So basically in that time frame of that midlife or getting towards midlife, the strength training, what I've noticed and a lot of clients, is that you can train hard and your volume might have to drop a little bit. Like for instance, you might be just as strong or close in strength as you were in your younger year, and you can train hard, you just can't train as long or as often as you once did. And that's that's a time where unless you're doing something for physique enhancement and competing like on a bodybuilding stage or whatnot, you might start to cut out some of the small things in an effort to, one, save time, because you're probably gainfully employed and busy as a professional or with family, so you can't really put as much time as you did when you were younger and in school, or really no dependents or relationships to hinder you, right? Or you're just more selfish. And so that's the time when really that mobility and flexibility starts to take a little bit of a bigger piece of the training pie, so to speak. So you might spend a little more time at the beginning doing some foam rolling, stretching, and then of course afterwards. And strength training could still be pretty intense, but now you've probably accumulated a few injuries, or you have aches or a bum shoulder or elbow, so you kind of back off a little bit and you find exercises that you can do still intensely without creating more injury or causing pain. Then you get into the 50s and beyond, and that's a time where the mobility and flexibility starts to take up an even bigger chunk of the pie. And Mike Boyle said it best a few years ago, that it's about a 30-30-30, or about 33%, I guess, if you want to be 100%, if you want to go by that pie. But a third of your time would be spent on mobility, stretching, and maybe a little more depending on your situation. Then you'd spend about a third of time doing strength training and sticking with compound movements, big body part movements that are going to give you the most bang for your buck, because you can't go, number one, as long in the gym or as intensely. So you start looking at rowing, pressing, squat, hip hinge type movements, but in a more like a reduced intensity way, or maybe with machines that are going to be more joint friendly. I know Arnold Schwarzenegger he does a lot of machines now, and he was a very big proponent of free weights, especially during his competing years. But the body changes, it ages. And cardio, again, it's going to be one of those things where, depending on your joints and how they've held up over the years, you might go on to an elliptical or something that's not weight bearing. So a bike, an elliptical, a rowing machine, something where it's not going to have as much impact on your joints, and it's still going to raise your heart rate up. And then remember, your heart rate, your max heart rate, as you age, continues to go down a little bit. So, that's between you, your physician, your cardiologist, what have you. But again, this is a tip, generally speaking. So we're closing in on 10 minutes for this video, so we're going to wrap it up. So I hope that tip helped you guys, and I will talk to you again soon. Whatever you do, train hard, have a plan, be intentful. If that's not a word, it is now. Take care, guys.